So, Rob, how you doing?
Doing okay. Are we having a guest speaker today?
Yes, indeed. Yes, we are. I'm actually Peter Vogel. He's an attorney with an interesting background in tech, so I'm excited to hear him.
It
But
looked familiar, like I had met him or seen him or heard of him before.
yeah, yeah. Bettina brought him to us from Texas, so he's on their CIO roundtable there, I believe. She can explain more of
Okay.
how yeah, these two are coming to us. But hi, Bettina.
I think she's connecting her audio still.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello. How was your trip?
Good. Good. It's an easy one.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, and there's Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Bettina, how are you?
Good. Oh, my video's not on. Why isn't my video on? There we go. There I am.
Well, we'll give everybody a couple more minutes. Well, I guess it is 2:00.
Yeah, and Peter, Guy sort of runs the AISIG.
Yes, and welcome. Thank you so much, Peter, for being willing.
Sure.
Yeah, and
Happy to.
Rob's the closest one to Dallas because he works for a company out of Houston.
Well, and I have staff in Arlington.
Oh, you have staff in Arlington. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then you'll when I tell you how remote I am right this minute for the weekend, I am about 50 miles south of Waco and about 30 miles east of Temple in Central Texas. So,
Oh, there you go. That's
yeah,
beautiful country.
it is. My wife's been on the same farm since 1848, her family, so pretty committed to it.
I was going to say, you don't look that old to be on the farm since 1848. But
I didn't say I've been there. I said her family's.
What town is that in?
Well, the closest town is 3 miles away, and the name of it is Buckholz.
Yeah. I know where
Probably.
Buckles is.
You do? Cameron is the county seat of Milam County. That's where we are.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I used to drive close through there, when I was coming and going through from
A&M.
Texas Tech all the way down to
Oh,
Houston.
Tech. Okay, yeah.
Cut through the
Well,
center.
yeah, my son went to A&M, and he used to come here lots on the weekends because
Yeah.
College Station is not far away.
Yeah.
But I went to UT, so there is conflict going on with all that.
Yeah. One of my clients was out in Cameron. So I had a lot of dealings out there for a while.
Okay.
So,
Well, speaking of which, the old Rockdale Alcoa plant is now one of the largest Bitcoin mining operations in the whole world.
is
in
that right?
Rockdale. Yeah.
they're leveraging the cheap power and
Wow.
Yeah, the company that bought it took over the old electric, and then a couple of other companies have come in and built their own. I went on a tour, and they showed us one day they had over 500,000 computers mining at one time in the old Alcoa plant.
Wow.
Wow.
well, I think we get started.
Well, good.
More people to join us, but I'll turn the time over to Bettina to introduce Peter and go from there.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I think, as you know, I'm with Bravo Tech, and we're actually based out of Dallas. Although now that I'm here, we're working, across the U.S. And we actually run a CIO roundtable in Dallas, which meets monthly, and that's been going on for probably about 15 years. Now, Peter actually knows our president is also named Andrew Jackson, very presidential. He's known him for over 20 years, and Peter's been participating in the CIO roundtable, so I've known him since I joined the company. And he does a yearly update on the legal issues around IT. And Peter has an amazing background. I hope you've had a chance to read his bio, but he started out as a programmer, then went to law school and became a lawyer. And so now he specializes in IT law. He went on his own, I guess a couple of years ago, and formed Vogel IT Law. And he's always fascinating to speak. So I think you'll really enjoy he's focusing a lot more on AI these days also. So I know you're going to enjoy his presentation. And then he wants to make it interactive. So I think, Peter, you said you sort of present a little section and then
Right.
get a chance to talk about it.
Right. That's what I'd like to do, if that's okay with everybody.
Wow, lovely.
All right. So Bettina, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. And it's wonderful to meet your AI special interest group. And Bettina told me not to prepare any PowerPoint slides because you guys didn't like them. So
I did not say that. I don't know why you think it.
No, I know, but let me say this. I use PowerPoint almost every day, so I find it kind of a fun thing to do and use tool. So it's kind of good for me. So let me share a little bit more about my background, and if I can get this to go. I did restart my solo practice a couple of years ago, but one of the things that just by way of background, before I studied law, just to add a little bit more to what Bettina said, I was a systems programmer on IBM mainframes for a number of years, including 2 years at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, and got a master's in computer science. Went back to Austin to work on a PhD, where I got my bachelor's degree, and hated it because none of my professors had ever worked. They were all the pure academics. And I went to law school never intending to be a lawyer. My plan was I would do computer consulting. So when I graduated, I came back to Dallas, which is my hometown, and I did computer consulting for a few years. And then clients asked me to represent them, so I hung up a shingle, and I was a sole practitioner for 14 years. And then I went to big law years ago because I was president of the Dallas Bar Association 30 years ago, 1994. And all my friends that had been solo practitioners, their practices suffered a lot because it took so much time. So 2 years ago, I was with a firm called Gardier Wynn Sewell, and they merged with a firm called Foley and Lardner, a big international law firm, and I just had enough of that. But among other things, I'm also active in cybersecurity. I'm the general counsel for a cybersecurity training group called the North Texas Information Systems Security Association. And for 12 years, I was the founding chair of a Texas Supreme Court Committee on Information Technology, responsible for automating the court system and creating eFiling. So at the end of the day, I will say I'm a trial lawyer. I've had cases in 38 states, and failed software implementation, copyright infringement, trade secret misappropriation, all kinds of things like that. But on the other hand, the other part of it is the other half of my practice is transactional, and I negotiate contracts for these things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I know everyone is familiar with this term, death by PowerPoint. And I'll tell you what I think it means. I went to see someone give a presentation a few weeks ago, and that individual read every word on 24 PowerPoint slides that we were all watching, and I found that kind of boring and dull. So I have planned for today, I'm going to go through 86 PowerPoint slides during this presentation. And just to give you perspective, last week I did an AI presentation about AI law for the Dallas Bar Association, and I went through 172 PowerPoint slides in 30 minutes. So this is kind of like, put on your seatbelt kind of approach. I'm going to start with this cartoon, which is one of my favorites. It says on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. And one of the reasons that's important is we really don't know who's on the other end. We know the IP address, but we don't know who's there. Second part about this that I think is important is that this cartoon was published in the New Yorker in 1993. So think about, where was the internet in 1993 that somebody would have been able to think of this? And then the third part, which I'm very proud of, is I have a license to use this, so there's no copyright infringement going on, which is always important. So here are the things I plan to talk about today. And like Bettina suggested, when we finish the AI history, maybe we could just stop and talk about that a little bit. And then we can do the same with the ethics. The law is a little bit longer the way I'm doing it. So I guess what I almost suggest is if I get to a topic somebody wants to talk about, we could just stop and talk about it. And I don't feel compelled to wait till the end. But never having done this presentation before, I don't know for sure. So here's the history I'm going to start with, just to give you an angle on this. For 30 years, I was an adjunct law professor at SMU, Edmond School of Law. And among other things, for 15 years, I taught a course on the law of e-commerce. And I started every semester with something I called my 6 Big Bang theory of the internet. And it's really important, I think, to get the perspective from a historical perspective. So here's the first Big Bang, starting with 1890 census, and you can see going up to social media to the future, which is the 7th Big Bang. So here's the first Big Bang. Everybody knows that the census must be counted every 10 years under the Constitution. And the 1880 census was not going to be finished being counted by 1890. So the Census Bureau went to Columbia University and they engaged a guy named Herman Hollerith, who was a PhD in math, and he invented the punch card. And if you'll remember this, the 80 columns in the punch card were around until Windows. So this lasted 100 years. This was pretty significant. The second Big Bang was the invasion of Normandy during World War II. At Harvard University, they invented what's now known as a computer, but at the time it was just a way to figure out how the tides were going to be a conflict for the troops coming onto Normandy Beach, which just coincidentally, for those of you who remember this, just happened to be 80 years ago. It's hard to believe it's that long ago, but that's how long ago that happened. The third Big Bang, I'm sure everybody remembers this, IBM finally got into the business of selling personal computers. There were a lot of other companies already selling personal computers, but nobody was picking a standard. Now, they may or may not have made the right decision by selecting an unknown software company for their operating system, a little company called Microsoft. And of course, Microsoft took over more than IBM taking over the whole PC world. And I think we all remember that, but it was very significant. The fourth Big Bang is one that is very important. It's because in 1995, Microsoft gave Internet Explorer away with Windows 95. So everybody had a browser. Before 1995, everybody didn't have a browser. Everybody couldn't use the internet. So this was a significant, and I'm going to talk more about this later in the legal perspective. And then the fifth Big Bang, and this is one that some of y'all may remember, Napster was a music selling company. It sold from people's computers. They would sell music, and there was a copyright infringement from all the music studios. And why that's so significant is copyright infringement put them out of business. But this guy, you may have heard of this story before. What's his name? Steve Jobs went to the music studios and said, I'll pay you a nickel for every tune. And he invented the iPod to go along with that, which led to the iPhone. So that was really much more significant than it seems. Then, of course, the sixth Big Bang was the advent of social media. And for those of you who noticed this down in the lower left of that orange box, it says perpetual beta. It sort of makes you realize about that really is what's going on in social media, I think. But that was significant. And then, of course, the seventh Big Bang is artificial intelligence. I mean, I think we've all seen that coming, but of course, on the other hand, it isn't new. And I think that's part of the problem with the reality where we are in 2024. This says it's very important that you try very, very hard to remember where you electronically transferred mommy and daddy's assets, which of course wouldn't be very funny if they were your assets. That's how I always look at this cartoon. So what really got things going, and all of us know IBM is one of the greatest marketing companies in the world. Well, they put Watson on Jeopardy in 2011 and won. And look at the score that came up to win Jeopardy in 2011. But this, I think, was one of the really significant things that got AI going in the world because IBM got involved. I found this statistic, which I still find it kind of amazing. I do and I don't. Over $200 billion spent on AI market last year is pretty astonishing. But one of the critical things, and I think we all know this and recognize it is because it's so important, is big data and what's going on with that, because AI relies on it. But since 2010, the Federal Trade Commission has been monitoring big data. And let me tell you what big data is, just so you know. I represent a number of counties in Texas, including Collin County, which is Plano, Frisco, and all that near just north of Dallas. And every single day, data aggregators go and collect data, what happens in every single courtroom in Collin County. Oh, also Dallas County and Travis County and Harris County and every county around the whole country. And then they sell that data, but they have no legal duty to verify it's accurate. And that's what the Federal Trade Commission is concerned about, is needing a law to try and make that work for the reality. And then their concern, obviously, is dealing with privacy. So I'm happy to chat about the history if anybody wants to raise any question. Let me make another comment. I give 30 or 40 presentations a year to CIOs, CISOs, CFOs. And last year I gave 2 presentations about cybersecurity and AI to groups of chief financial officers, one in Fort Worth and one in Dallas. And I started each presentation with this question: how many of y'all have been using search engines for the past 20 years and did not know machine learning was in the middle of that? And you know what? Everybody looked at me like I was from Mars, and yet everybody had been using machine learning with Google and all the other search engines. So I am happy if somebody's got a question they want to raise an issue now. I'm happy to discuss it if you like, or wake you up to tell you you could ask a question. It's kind of up to you. Anybody? Okay, I'm open. I don't see any hands or chat or anything going on, so I'll just move on then. So this says, we understand you're not happy with our privacy policy. And I don't know how happy anybody would be if they had 2 guys like that show up their front door. So let's talk about the AI ethics, which I think is really important. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get to this at some point, but last year I was appointed to a State Bar of Texas task force on AI. And that's one of the critical things we're looking at, is the ethical responsibilities that lawyers have, but it's ethical use, period. In general, it has nothing to do just with lawyers, obviously. So what I did was I went out, because this is all related to cyber stuff. I looked up cyber ethics in Wikipedia, which I'm sure everybody familiar with Wikipedia? So probably not. Okay. I'm just kidding. And I've changed content on Wikipedia. I'm sure others have. But what I found, what I thought was kind of funny, was that Wikipedia on cyber ethics has the 10 commandments of computer ethics. So what I did was I changed computer to internet. And, it doesn't seem like in the past 32 years there's been a big difference. Like number 4, thou shalt not use the internet to steal, or number 5, thou shalt not use the internet to bear false witness. And so the thing is, there's nothing new in terms of the ethical responsibilities in dealing with anything we're looking at today than before. This says it's a funny feeling I'm just being Googled. Speaking of which, I'll give you a valuable take-home bit of information. That what the word Google means, it's the number 1 with 100 zeros next to it. And that's pretty valuable, right? Okay, now I'm going to stop again and say, does anybody have any questions or wants to talk about any of this? Or not? Okay, so the next topic we're going to talk about, go the wrong way, is dealing with AI laws. And this is really the rest of what I'm going to talk about. So I welcome anybody to stop me as I go through this.
But Peter, you're kind of establishing a foundation, right? Here's the history, and then
right. And then when we get done, we can just stop and we can talk. I mean, whatever you guys want to do.
cool. There's a lot of, like, most of us are technically focused, and so I think wrapping our head around what are the implications of the history, I think you'll show us some of those as you discuss the law. But I think
that's exactly what I'm doing right now, as a matter of fact, because I think this is important. I made the comment earlier about Windows 95 and the 4th Big Bang. But what happened was, as a result of this, looking at what was pornography online at the time, this was a concern. and the Supreme Court's ruling on what is pornographic from Justice Potter Stewart. I know it when I see it, but the motion picture involved in this case is not it. I mean, that's the definition of pornography according to the Supreme Court. They didn't know and understand. So so as a result of this, what happened in 1996 was dealing with pornography online. Congress passed part of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. They passed something called the Communications Decency Act of 1996. So that's what I'm saying. I got a browser. Congress said we need to protect the people in the United States from pornography online, right? So they passed the Communications Decency Act. Now, part of the problem with the Communications Decency Act was as soon as it became law, there was a lawsuit brought by the American Civil Liberties Union against it. And the first case was Reno 1. And the reason that this lawsuit was brought, which is not going to be a surprise, is under the Communications Decency Act, there could be no internet content that had photographs or paintings or anything of nude women or men. And so all the libraries and art studios and museums all over the country went crazy to say, we have to be able to promote our art and the books that have already been out there forever. And so this whole litigation went on dealing with the violation of the Communications Decency Act. And then the first action you can see was the American Civil Liberties Union, Electronic Privacy Information Center, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And then the ACLU kept it going with this privacy group, Electronic Frontier Foundation, and Planned Parenthood got involved. But in the second action, you can see who was involved in it. Apple Computer, CompuServe, Microsoft. This really just went the wrong way. And my point on all this, more than anything else, is that what I am concerned about is Congress in 2025 might pass some laws that are completely ridiculous, and then they go to judges who don't understand them to try and interpret what do they mean. So, Guy, based on what you were saying before, from a historical perspective, that's how I'm looking at what's going to happen next. And I'll say this in the worst way possible. There's a member of the United States Senate named John Cornyn from Texas, and he and I went to law school together. And I promise you, John does not understand anything about this. So I can't imagine how we could help pass a law that would make sense. And about a year ago, when AI was kind of taking off, there was a hearing in Congress. I don't know how many of y'all saw that. Mark Zuckerberg went, among others. And what happened was members of Congress asked the technology people questions. And then it didn't matter what the answer was. They just asked the next question because they didn't understand what the answers meant. And people all over the country, particularly technology people, go, why didn't they ask a follow-up question? They didn't know how to ask a follow-up question. So what I'm concerned about is that we're going to get a law passed like the Communications Decency Act that will be way off base from the reality of the fact that AI is everywhere. You know, people are acting like Google is just now coming up with something new. They've been doing machine learning the whole time we've been using Google, everybody.
So has Netflix and any recommendation and our phones. I mean, it's everywhere already. So
it is, but what ends up happening, it starts to get different. Yesterday, I represent a large. I'm very involved in the healthcare industry. One of my clients, Texas Health Resources, is the second largest health provider in the state of Texas, and they, among others, they have to be concerned that the software products that they're using are not violating any privacy laws and how they manage data. And I represent another company in the healthcare space. This is very interesting. They use artificial intelligence to help diagnose breast cancer by doing deep dives in the data for patients. And I think, and that didn't just happen. I mean, they've got 3 patents on that. So that what I'm saying is this is not new stuff, but we have to be concerned about the privacy laws that are in place.
So what legislation are you expecting that they would enact next year?
Well, what I'm afraid of is going to be dumb and stupid, and everybody will go, why did Congress pass something like that? And then what happens is somebody challenges it, like the American Civil Liberties Union, or maybe Epic, the large software company in the healthcare space, would say, the way they've written this law, our technology violates.
Yeah, there's no way we can comply.
Yeah, and then we can't, it's unreasonable. And so what they do is they would take it to court and fight about it. If they could persuade a judge, then maybe the law would get overturned, maybe not. And then maybe it would go into courts for a long time because the trial judge doesn't get it. And the way the federal court system works is, and I think everybody knows this, the trial courts, we have 85 district courts around the United States, in all the states. And then we also have 11 different circuits for appeal. And so if there's an appeal from a district court, a trial court, it goes to one of the 11 circuits. And then if the circuits don't agree on something, then it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. But it takes years to get to the Supreme Court. I think we know that just from watching the news on any given political issue on any given day. You never know how long it's going to take to get to the Supreme Court. And then you have to presume that the Supreme Court would have the faintest idea about what it means, which I'm not holding my breath on. That's part of the problem. The other thing is, if we've had AI and it is written in software all over the internet and all over the world, how do we undo that? Oh, oops, that didn't sound good.
Is that Sean? Oops.
Everybody mute yourself. That might help.
All right, thank you. I don't know what happened there. So those are the concerns I have about what might go wrong on that with the law. So I guess we could go ahead and.
Peter, can I ask a question real quick? You mentioned
Sure.
The example of like Facebook going before Congress and asking some questions, but not having the intelligence of being able to follow up with some of the answers that were given. Do you see this as being kind of, or I should say anyway, I see this as being more the norm, where technology is kind of overtaking, it's becoming the standard. It's like transitioning from horseback riding to riding cars. Do you see that as being kind of an adopted standard, everyone kind of understanding that that's a standard? Or do you see people kind of just thinking, well, that's just technology, it doesn't really apply in this field or in that field or whatever?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, because you jumped ahead to something that I was going to talk about. So let me tell you what that is. And that is a topic I describe as internet jurisdiction. And so it depends that the laws of any country are what are socially acceptable in that country. So for instance, what is socially acceptable in Beijing may not be socially acceptable in Salt Lake City or Rio or London. It doesn't matter, but it's whatever is socially acceptable in the local community. And what has happened with the internet is, because of the lack of control over jurisdictional guidelines between different countries, we have laws that control different actions on the internet that have a lot to do with where the data is located. So for instance, the law of the country where the data is located is what controls. So let me give you an example of that, just so you see. In about 2000, there were some anti-Semitic groups that got an injunction in France to keep Yahoo from selling Nazi memorabilia on the Yahoo website, not in France, but the website in the United States. And so Yahoo went to court in the United States and said, under the First Amendment, we can sell Nazi memorabilia in the United States. And the court agreed, and it went on appeal. And the Court of Appeals says French law doesn't apply in the United States. If you want to fight about this, you need to go to France. And that's kind of one of those early cases in looking at the internet about how these things apply. And so my point is that depending on where the data and the AI software is, that law may be what controls. And it isn't just what we want it to be in the United States. If you're using, let me just guess, everyone on this call, everyone in your organization uses the cloud, because everyone on earth uses the cloud now. But we don't necessarily know where the data is associated with the use in the cloud, the software as a service. And that causes more complication. So Rob, so back to your question then, even though it may be well-intentioned, if another country's law is the one that has control, then it makes it more complicated to decide.
Well, I think my question was more aimed at those that are involved in litigation. Do you see the education or the exposure of judges or those involved in interpreting laws, that they are becoming forcibly more educated in technology laws?
I wish that were the case, but it has not been my experience.
It's amazing.
What I have found is generally, and let me say this, in my litigation, I only represent buyers and sellers of information technology and internet services. That's all I've ever done in my whole career. I've had cases in 38 states, and I would say virtually no judge understands what we're talking about. And it's not getting any better today just because people use computers.
So when you were at SMU, you didn't see any more technology being pushed on students? Like, hey, you need to learn this?
No, I'm not suggesting that, but that doesn't mean that the judges understand it and how it implies how they make decisions in the law.
Sure, but I'm just thinking rising generations.
Well, theoretically, I think that's true. Yeah, as we get older, I would say in theory that's true, but the reality is I think it's not so simple.
Yeah, it's a complex issue. Yeah.
Well, then the other thing is judges, I'll say this in the worst way possible, and I know many of my judge friends have heard me say this. The house odds in any particular case that you might have in the courthouse are 50-50. 50% of the time they get it right, 50% of the time they get it wrong. And that's just the reality. As a matter of fact, I tell my clients if they want to fight in litigation, that they might have more fun in Las Vegas and the house odds might be better than going to the courthouse. Because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Seems like it's going to be a generational thing, right? It'll take a generation to.
I'd say that's true. I mean, I'll say it a little differently. And I think that's really what Rob is asking in a way too, is I have 3 grandsons and they know and use the internet and technology very differently than my children did, just by generations. But that doesn't mean that the people at the courthouse that make decisions understand the nuances of what's going on with it. There's kind of a difference there. Well, let me say this, because I think it's an answer to it. It's answering it in a different way. When I first started practicing, I didn't want anybody on a jury that knew anything about a computer, because out of the 12 people on the panel and only one person knew what a computer was, that means that one person would make all the decisions for the whole jury, because everybody would look to that person and say, what's the right answer to this question? Well, that's not true anymore. That's the way it was 30 years ago, not now. So from that perspective, I think you're right that maybe juries are smarter about it, but doesn't mean judges are, and they're the ones that make the decisions in the courtroom. And more than once, I had a judge say to me after a hearing, I think you're right. I think you've given me all the right evidence, but I'm going to rule against you anyway. So I go, okay, thank you so much, you know. Including Salt Lake City, I might add. So I've been there in court, so. Okay, so any other questions, or I can launch back into my
Yeah.
None for me.
PowerPoint?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, should I get back? Should I go again? Oh, wait, I see something in chat. Oh,
I think we're good. Yeah,
okay,
good.
yeah. Okay, yeah, I see that. Okay, all right, so let's do this. It says, forget your leader, where's your information systems manager? A good question, of course. Okay, so I mentioned this before, but it still kind of hurts my head. Last June 2023, the State Bar of Texas created a task force on responsible AI in the law. And just so you know, number-wise, because it's kind of astonishing, we have 113,000 lawyers in the state of Texas. I was one of 7 lawyers appointed to this task force. So I've been involved in helping the state deal with it. And then last June, we issued our annual report or year-end report for the first year. And you could see we ended up with more members and actually 2 judges out of the group. So it ended up, we do have some judges, and they're both relatively technically oriented and well thought of in this area. But then we made recommendations about things that needed to happen, including creating a committee dealing with monitoring legislation and doing ongoing studies of what's going on, and the rules of evidence, because we don't want people cheating in the courtroom and dealing with creating evidence that's a deep fake or hallucination. And then we have continuing legal education training, and we want all the lawyers in the state to be trained in how to use AI and its meaning. This says, be patient, madam. At this very moment, high-speed computers are working to eliminate or aggravate your problem. And I think we've all been there. So we know that problem. May not get hear it. No. So just to be specific on this, one of the law firms I ended up in for a few years was a firm called Foley and Lardner. And last month, they came up with this report of what's going on in California artificial intelligence. And you can see the different laws that they're considering dealing, and all of these have been passed. AI risk management, AI in healthcare, privacy in AI, watermarking AI generated content, legal definition of AI, AI education initiatives. Can't see that because of this thing. Robot calls using AI, combating deepfake pornography, election fake, deepfakes, AI in the entertainment industry. And then what ended up happening, interestingly enough, was the governor vetoed an AI bill, and it was one that Salesforce wanted to have vetoed because they didn't want. Now, they don't have much power in the IT world, as I think all of y'all know. I'm kidding. I didn't mean that. But it's just interesting to see how that fits together with, you know, what's going on in California. Now, I'll say this in the worst way possible, and that is, we all know that California has a track record of coming up with new laws ahead of virtually everybody else in the country. So this may foreshadow what other states are going to do. And last year, I think the number of states dealing with or introduced new laws, there were 45 states that had new laws proposed in their legislatures this year alone, in 2024. This says, for health and safety reasons, we'll be transitioning to cybercrime. And I made this comment a few minutes ago about internet jurisdiction, but it is really important to have a perspective and understanding about how the law in the country where the data is operating and how that works. I know everyone understands and appreciates that a totalitarian country like China, I'm not being critical of it, I'm just saying that's how they run themselves. They changed their privacy law a few years ago, and that may have impacted some of you. I had a client that I gave some advice to about how they were managing some of their manufacturing operations in China. And I don't know if you know this or not, but in China, before the law went into effect, there was a requirement that you couldn't have a computer operating outside of China, managing data in China. And so it turned out my client got around to telling me that they didn't have a computer in China, but they were manufacturing there. So they weren't even in compliance with the law. So I guess that happens all the time. So the other law that probably is the biggest one that everybody needs to take into account is the EU GDPR. And it went into effect in May of 2018. And why, in a way, that was not significant is it was really not a new law. That law replaced the 1995 Data Directive. And the 1990 Data Directive, the problem with it, that the member states in the EU didn't enforce it. And so now there's been a change, and it's being, obviously, we all know GDPR is being enforced. And then in 2018, the EU got involved with dealing with AI regulation. And so now they've passed an AI Act, and this is something that they've taken into account about what they're planning. And if you go investigate the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, at the very high level, they passed this in February, they have a lot of requirements they put on people about using the AI Act and the obligations that fall on the providers and dealing with general purpose AI. They also created a responsibilities of Europe Commission and AI office. But when you look at how long it's going to take 36 months till August of 2027 before it really is in place. So that's going to be an interesting issue in dealing with how this comes about to take so long. So, and this is a quote on my website that I like, and that is, "I never think of the future. It comes soon enough," from Albert Einstein. So I certainly welcome any other additional questions on these topics from the group.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So, well, from the perspective of a AI product developer, that's what I do a lot of. I want to do more of. And what, like, from your perspective, should I consider when I'm developing AI? Obviously, you pointed out where the data resides is very important. Are there other factors I should consider? I should maybe place now.
I think the big one because we're looking at it from the legal angle, and that is personal identifiable information and making sure it's protected properly, because one of the issues that we have to be concerned about is the example I gave before, healthcare, for instance. Under the HIPAA laws, the 18 data elements that are under HIPAA, most of that information is freely available. It's all over the internet. As a matter of fact, until 1992, 18 states used Social Security numbers for a driver's license.
Yeah.
So there are Social Security numbers all over the place. And then there's also, I subscribe to a service, I don't think I need to name it, but I subscribe to this data service, and they have a database of the Social Security numbers of everybody who's dead in the United States. And when I first saw that, I thought, well, that is just crazy. That's an opportunity to steal an identity. And really the reason it's there is so that banks will be able to go to that database to make sure they don't open up a new account using that Social Security number. But what happens is, in artificial intelligence, the concern is if you are using the personal identifiable information of an individual, and it's used in machine learning, are you giving up the privacy associated with that PII by doing that? And that's a question. I'm not sure there's an answer to it. I'm just saying that's one of the questions, is dealing with private information.
Okay.
And then it depends on the business and how they use that. And let me say this, I, on a daily basis, draft online terms and privacy policies. And I would say, I've gone around the country as I give speeches and take a poll, and I would say less than 1% of the people on earth look at online terms. So what happens is, if you are providing AI software for an online service, the online terms need to take into account that there is either an agreement or disagreement that the privacy and confidential information are being managed properly. For instance, just by way of example, ChatGPT. I'd say most people who use ChatGPT don't bother to go look at the privacy policy to see what is ChatGPT doing with that data that you use to provide to them. So those are the questions I think from a software development standpoint I'd be concerned with.
Okay. And my other question was the maybe the counterpart to that is, as an IT leader, procuring solutions for my team, what are the 20 questions I need to ask the providers? How do I validate or verify that they're doing what they say they're doing with my data and that they're keeping it in the places that, do I put all that in a contract and just say, yeah,
No, I think you need to, I agree. Well, let me say this, because I have negotiated such things.
yeah,
I think when you use a software as a service, let me take a step back. The software as a service is we think we know who we're doing business with, and it isn't always so clear. So I think the important thing would be when you sign a software as a service agreement, you get the provider to give you all of the links associated with all the software technologies that are being used on that software as a service, so you can verify whether or not the vendors are doing that. And I'll just give you an example. I did a Stripe credit card agreement for a client, international client, a few years ago, and they gave me a 6-page purchase order. I had to look at 37 online terms to figure out what to change in the 6 pages.
you need AI for that.
Well, I don't know if I'd trust AI for that, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
No, but that's my point, is that I think most people don't look at that, and that's really what we need to do is take a look at the online terms and see what it's saying. And I'll just give you an example. I did a presentation for some probate judges and lawyers last fall, a year ago, and I showed them how Amazon AWS has AI as a service. And I showed them how it worked, and I demonstrated the cost, their charging mechanism and everything. And then I showed them that their biggest customer is a company called LexisNexis. But LexisNexis doesn't say on their website they're using AWS AI as a service. And that's very common, where the software as a service vendor they're not contractually open about who they're doing business with. That's what you need to find out. The vendors that are providing that, what are they doing? And what are they contractually agreeing to? Because I've gotten vendors, software as a service vendors, to agree they would not add new AI tools without letting my client know if we approved or not to use technology after that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's a motivation for the vendor to disclose all that in order, and they can disclose it under an NDA or something, so that they're not like giving up secret sauce or something like that. But
well, if you have a confidential, the confidentiality provisions, if they put it under that and they say it's confidential, then I think you have that duty, whether there's an NDA in addition or not.
Yeah,
depends
yeah.
on the contract says.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess from a provider perspective, I need to make sure I have my tech stack complete and links to privacy. Like this is what I'm using, and here's the mountain of privacy agreements that and terms that you might need to go through to verify your needs are met with my software. And then from the other, you need to do that, be willing to do that legwork.
And then from the cybersecurity angle that goes along with that, it might be important to look at a SOC 2 Type 2 report for the vendor that's providing the service, to make sure you know what country the data is being processed in, to know what other laws may apply.
Yeah, that blows my mind a little bit, but yeah, I understand why some of my clients are so picky. Like, we will only process in the US. You cannot put our data anywhere else. So I've
Yeah.
had to have my offshore people completely divorced from the data. They're just working on synthetic data or fabricated data, and
Yeah.
the production data is all safe here in the US.
Yeah, and one of the things, I'm going to change the subject for just 1 second, just because we didn't say this earlier. I told Bettina that I would send a PDF version of this PowerPoint to share with your SIG.
Perfect, thank you. And I should have asked you at the beginning, but are you okay with us posting this video on YouTube and linking to you and things like that?
Sure. Matter of fact, I certainly welcome, anybody sending an email. Here's my email address. I try to be happy to answer any questions from the group today or in the future. And I think it's just wonderful opportunity to talk about this, because this is, like I said, it's old news and yet it's new news. And as Rob pointed out before, we need to get ready for the next generation that theoretically will understand it better than the older folks.
Yeah. Yeah,
But I remember this when I was growing up, that people used to say they were scared to death of computers because they would replace jobs. And what I have found is it isn't that they replaced jobs. They created new jobs that didn't exist before that technology was there. So old jobs went away, but new jobs were created. And I think the same is going to be true with AI. It's going to create new opportunities for professionals.
When you give a second question, go ahead, MZ.
I have a comment on Guy, your question, like for every of my projects, with every purchase of software or any other product that we do, I have a 42-page RFI document where I go over, prior to signing any contracts with any of our vendors, to Peter's comment of where the data is coming from, where the developers are residing, what kind of computers they use, if they download data for their development or not, which regions the services are being run, what kind of access. I mean, it's like a very, very comprehensive list. And they have to provide all of their audit reports of their security breaches, how they handled what happened, like everything. It's pretty hideous process, and will slow you down quite a bit, because then it goes to legals, and legals take forever to review every word and every every clause in the contract in that regard. But I have a question for Peter. You mentioned all these laws that are going to be created by people that are not very versed with, technology and computers. Educate me, please. What is the lawmaking process? Like, if you create a law that's like very insufficient today, and tomorrow you make a change, is the previous law still in place, or it gets replaced with the new updated one? Because I'm seeing like a lot of collateral damage, that may happen from all this legislative activity.
You asked a much more complicated question than you thought you did, and that is
Oh,
that
seriously?
the answer to what happens with the law is the answer is yes and no, because it varies by law, varies by state about what was changed and what was not, because there are nuances to all kinds of laws. If we think about the U.S. Constitution from 1789 and how that has been changed over the years, depending on what's going on. But I think that in general, the nuances of change are important. And I'll just give you an example, because right this minute, as we sit here this moment, I have 2 trade secret lawsuits going on, misappropriation of trade secrets. And there are state laws that apply, and there's also a federal law. So depending on which combination of which states are involved, and if they're using the federal law as well, there's a different angle on it. So there's a different combination depending on what the laws are, and that varies kind of law by law. There's not a simple one approach to it. That would be too easy, I think. So.
Right, and that's what makes a lawyer a good lawyer, right? To find the right door to to use, with every case, which is understandable.
Yeah. Well, and then there are half the people on one side and half on the other. So, half the people are right half the time kind of thing.
Is it going to be like with everything, like ups and downs? Like we'll do a lot of mistakes and then we'll start correcting those, with
Well,
AI, or is it going to make enough damage that there will be no way back?
no. My point, I think I tried to stress this, but I think the critical thing is there is AI software and technology all over the universe right now. This is not a new issue. My concern is that we get some federal or Canadian law or some other law that tries to take into account it just happened in 2024 and doesn't take into account what happened 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago with machine learning and where that data is and how it's being used. Like the Google search engine. Like I say, that is not new. But yet, on the other hand, they now have their own AI tools, but they promote them to help you do searches. I'm sure we all notice that when we use the tools.
Along these lines, I was attended the Utah AI Summit this past week and learned a little bit more. Utah has what they're calling a laboratory, AI laboratory. So businesses that are producing stuff for AI can go there and talk with the state and the legislate, like the experts on, this is what we're doing, and maybe they'll get a forbearance or something on some of the regulations so that they can explore a unique business model without some of the challenges that like basically take the reins off a little bit, go explore, but then come back and bring it into something within the legal structure that exists.
Well, a good example of that would be cryptocurrency and blockchain transactions, because many states have adopted the sandbox approach where they have testing entities that allow vendors that are moving into cryptocurrency to prove that their blockchains are secure and that they work properly before they can even offer that technology in that state. So that's not everywhere. It started in Arizona. As a matter of fact, I think
we have
Wyoming, one of the big states in that space too.
I think we have a sandbox here.
Yeah, I think you do. I believe that's correct.
I don't know how to use the thing. Is that pertinent to this stuff? Could you maybe talk about it if it is?
Well, it is from the standpoint that what governments are doing, and not all governments, but like, for instance, this particular one we're talking about, is it allows vendors to come prove to the state that their technology, whatever it is, works as they represent it to work. And so that they have the right to sell it and commercialize it in that state. So it isn't just blockchain crypto. That's what I'm saying is it can be for almost anything. And actually where that started is, I vaguely recall the first place it started was in the UK before it ever came to the US. So it's been the exploration and the use of the sandbox is not new. But I think from a technology standpoint, that's kind of old news anyway. You want to test it. We have beta. I mean, we've all been involved in beta forever. That isn't new either. So
I love the legal application though, because I just worry about, I think I share your concern, like these people don't really understand technology. You have to figure out some sort of way of regulating, legislating fair, justice type things. And it's just too soon in so many of these cases to really understand what its implications are. So how are you going to create a law for something that, it's going to bounce out of the room in another direction that we expect? And then, yeah. So I love the idea of having a laboratory or a sandbox where you can come and work that out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, does anyone else have any other questions? I think we're kind of running out of time here, but
yeah,
I'm glad to have the discussion.
No other questions, and we'll just say thank you, Peter, so much for for your expertise and your willingness to come and share with us. This has been really informative to me. So I
Well,
appreciate it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
everyone. And I'll get a copy of Peter's presentation and send it to you guys. So if anybody wants to see that. There's a lot
Okay.
of good thoughts there.
Bettina, thank you very much. And Guy, thank you for leading the discussion today. I appreciate it. And meeting Rob as well. So thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure. And we'll talk soon.
Okay. Look forward to it. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.